Hi guys! So today you and I are going to talk about hard problems. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, what is it that you think is so hard that you need a 10x developer? Well, that's a great question. So this was in response to a video that I made where I'm referring to that certain problems require a true 10x developer in order to solve, and I had a few of these sorts of people who question my reasoning around having a genius programmer or a 10x developer or something like that. And to make to define that a little bit before we go forward, for me, a 10x developer is an individual who can raise the delivery speed and the quality and so forth. It basically can scale their performance levels, hopefully, to other people. Because if you do the math a little bit, if I can improve the speed of delivery or the quality of the work of 100 other developers, then, well, what does that make me? Well, it depends on if we are going to put a number on that thing, but potentially I'm a 100x developer. You can be any X developer if you know how to do these things. To make a concrete example, what would you define the, say, Kubernetes team or the React team or the people who'd made like the ASP.NET frameworks or so forth, like any framework we're using today that doesn't force you to literally just move bits around in assembly. What X are they? Well, that's the reasoning that I have. I usually say that I find it very difficult to believe, I've never seen it, that you have software developers who are just 10 times faster at typing things out. Usually what I find is that a 10x developer can solve problems that are beyond the average software developer, and that to me is a 10x developer, because if you measure time to delivery, usually you'll find that on an average story, an average task, there's not much of a difference in many cases between one developer and another if it's a trivial problem. The thing that usually takes time is, how do I figure out an efficient solution to a problem that is very complicated? Some people it's beyond them, they don't actually know how to solve it, and that's why some developers estimate a task to, say, a day, and some will estimate it to a week. We're different levels. And so for me, what a 10x developer is extremely good at solving, and I would go as far as to say that they're critical. They are a prerequisite to solve these sorts of problems. Well, it's the problem that I call a systematic problem. So let's talk about a systematic problem. So a systematic problem, per my definition, is an issue where it's not a question of that you don't know how to make the right configuration in a configuration file, or it's not that you don't know how to get your CSS to work. It's not a one area type of problem. It is a problem of, you basically have a range, because that's how every single software delivery process works. Every application is made up of multiple technologies, all of them. And this is one of the reasons why I tell people that the best software developers are always full stack. Always, 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 always. The reason being because it's a full stack problem. Delivering software and actually making business value is a full stack problem. It will always be a full stack problem. And if you only learn how to master one part of that, it will make you perhaps very good at that part. That part of the thing is going to work really well for you, and you can probably make a few things happen here and there. But the reality is that the most difficult problem is not just that thing is working really well, in my opinion at the very least, or based on what I've seen. Usually it's a problem of the whole thing. Because, as I like to say, everything is connected, everything is a network. In other words, I hope it's a fairly fair and accurate assessment to say that if you have a shitty delivery process, you're gonna have a shitty product. I can't really see a scenario where that's not going to be true. And that means that if you don't understand how your delivery process is being impacted by different practices, different ways of working within the team, or like social aspects, tooling choices, how do you like culture choices. Perhaps I don't want to go all the way into too much the social and the soft skills here, because it's not just about that, it's about technical matters as well. Is your software developers even good enough to work on this specific project? Like, do they actually know how to structure things, and so forth and so forth? All these factors require enormous experience, emotional intelligence, and skill, and so forth to resolve. And the reality is that, guys, it is the norm that developers don't know how to solve this problem. They really don't. And the managers don't know how to solve it either. Hence why I argue that most software teams work fairly ineffectively, and hence why I go as far. Empirically, I've never been ever on any project in my entire career where somebody has just said everything works really, really well. Never. And I argue that there's a reason for that, because the problem that I just described is what I call a systematic problem. It's not a problem of an area, it is a problem of the entire process, the whole system itself, not just the code, but the system of delivery. And that is an issue that, as I've said, if you can solve that problem, it is the equivalent, I will go and say at the very least, to going from having a workshop of people who are sort of just sitting around a work table, mashing things together and trying to make toys or cars or whatever, like they're trying to construct things in a very manual process, to building a factory which not automatic necessarily, but basically an entire assembly line where you have standardized the process of delivery. You've found the practices that are quote unquote optimal for doing something, so that you can basically streamline it to a point where you're consistently just getting the same thing out. And that is industrial, going full industry on something. That is what software is trying to achieve today. We are at, if you think about it, like in a historical perspective, it used to be the case that all your goods that are usually today mass produced, they were made by hand by people where varying quality levels was the norm. If you went to one shop or another shop or one vendor or another vendor, you could have vastly different levels of quality. Today we standardize things and streamline them and so forth, because good practices have emerged to the point where everybody sort of follows them, and sometimes it's a law, it's legally required for you to do certain things. Software is not there at this point, not into the same extent. We're a fairly young industry, and that means that we're still sort of in the good old days where people are just figuring out how to do things in essence, and like one software developer is vastly different from another one, or one software company is different from another one, etc. The quality levels range is enormous, and a 10x developer is an individual who has been around so long and seen so much that they know how to go into such a situation and go, if we just do these things, you will get an overall higher quality and better output from everybody who is part of that process. So what I want you to take away from this is that what I argue is a problem that is hard enough that it requires a 10x developer is to fix what I call systematic problems. So there are many problems that are just computationally really, really hard. You need really, really smart people for certain tasks, but the average software company's biggest problem isn't to find an individual or do like a specific part of an application, building something specific that is difficult to understand. It is usually to do the whole thing, to master all of the areas that are necessary in order to actually deliver software efficiently. And that is something that is beyond practically every single software developer I've ever met. I've never met, in almost never, it's very rare that I find a software developer who knows this stuff. Because, as I've said, the perspective of most software developers is that you master that one part. But as with my reference to an assembly line, that's just one part of the whole thing. And it doesn't matter if you're really, really good at your thing. The attitude of most software developers is that I just want to be good at that one thing. And that's okay, because right now I'm going to get paid if I'm just good at that one thing, because the way that the industry is working is very similar to a factory like that. We hire one person for one thing, and then another person for another thing, and then another person for another thing, etc., etc. And then we put managers who don't really know anything in charge of just orchestrating things so that it's going to work, which is on average not actually working out all that well for most software companies, because software development is a very expensive process and very, very error prone at this point. 10x developers are the sort of people who can get results. The people who don't just ship a story, but they actually know how to actually streamline things to the point where basically the success is guaranteed at minimal cost. And that is incidentally, I will argue, the same thing Ford did, same thing most industry titans who understood that it doesn't really matter if you have one or two really, really good workers. What matters is that you can create a reproducible process that can be scaled to an entire organization, or to have a end-to-end ownership that works as well as possible. That is the thing that really matters, because it doesn't matter if one or two things are working if everything else is sort of impacting in a negative. Everything affects everything else. Everything's connected. So having a software developer who knows all of those areas and knows how to not just understand how these work, because most software developers they're really good as an individual, as I like to say. They're really good at just doing things themselves, but having that understanding and then having them be able to coach, and to not just coach, but to actually document things and make sure that the company adopts the right practices in order to basically scale their own talent levels to a larger scope of people. In other words, going from a place where people are sort of cobbling things together manually to streamlining it so that it's more of an assembly line type of thing. That, I argue, is a 10x developer. It is a genius level individual who is required. It's not a person that you train. It's a person that you are usually finding people like that. These are people who are true rockstar software developers who care about software development as a craft. They have a lifestyle, and you might find one or two of those people in any given company at best. Have a great day.